Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a paranormal investigation that completely flips the script on the supernatural. We're looking at some wild evidence proving that sometimes ghosts aren't actually out to scare us at all. They're just waiting for someone, literally anyone, to finally listen. We're ditching those classic horror movie tropes and diving into the raw, historical, and psychological realities of what it actually means to be haunted. So let's kick things off with the ultimate question. What exactly anchors a spirit to our physical world for centuries? I mean, why wouldn't a soul just move on? We always kind of assume it's unfinished business or some quest for revenge, right? Well, a recent deep dive investigation into a centuries-old UK prison and a remote Indian estate revealed a reality that is just so much more heartbreaking. The team we're following today operates on this one incredibly profound philosophy. Dead people don't know they are dead. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? But these investigators realize that a lot of these trapped entities are basically stuck in a psychological loop. They have zero idea their physical lives are over, and they're still reacting to the trauma and the rules of the world they lived in hundreds of years ago. To really grasp this, we're heading over to the UK's Derby Gaol. This is a notorious 400-year-old prison where the monarchy came up with punishments that went way beyond just ending someone's life. They were literally designing punishments for the afterlife. It perfectly captures just how brutal the 16th and 17th centuries were. Look, if you committed a common crime, like stealing some food, you were executed. Standard death penalty. But if you committed treason, if you dared to rebel against the king, the monarchy decided death simply wasn't enough. You got a highly calculated punishment, specifically engineered to trap your soul on Earth forever. They did this publicly, step by gruesome step, for a terrifying reason. Back then, the prevailing religious belief was that a mutilated, unwhole body literally could not enter heaven. So the crown used this horrific execution method to make absolutely sure traitors were rejected at heaven's gates. Denied entry above, and way too terrified of eternal torture to willingly go to hell, these souls were essentially forced to stay in the physical realm. The monarchy weaponized spirituality to lock their enemies in this prison forever. Now, as you might guess, that kind of horrific history leaves behind a massive amount of residual energy. The investigative team captured some absolutely undeniable evidence at Derby Jail. We're talking heavy glass sliding right across a bar and clinking together, caught live on camera. Strange EMF reader spikes that completely defy the isolated environment, the relentless ringing of a traditional dead bell the team brought along. And honestly, the most chilling part? They caught the phantom heavy gasps of a dying man on audio right as they mimicked an execution countdown. When you're dealing with that level of terrifying energy, human instinct says run, right? But empathetic investigators don't run away. They dig deeper to find the historical truth. While in the jail, the team encountered two very distinct male energies. On one side, you had this aggressive former jailer, Blythe Simpson, a genuinely cruel guy who ran a bar in the prison and tortured the inmates. On the other side, they kept picking up on this supposed violent traitor named Jeremiah Brandreth. He was actually one of the few men in history who suffered that soul-trapping execution we just talked about. To untangle what was really going on, the team used the Estes method. If you're not familiar, this is an intense sensory deprivation technique where an investigator wears a blindfold and noise-canceling headphones connected to a spirit box. It isolates them so they become a pure conduit for spirit communication. Well, investigator Pujo was sitting in total darkness in a 400-year-old cell using this method and suddenly reported feeling completely surrounded by dark, oppressive entities. But right in the middle of this spiritual attack, it was Jeremiah, the supposed violent traitor, who stepped up to protect her. That moment changed everything. The team realized Jeremiah wasn't dangerous at all. He was a totally innocent man, a political rebel whose only crime was fighting for his people's freedom against a tyrannical monarchy. For centuries, he had been sitting in the dark of that prison, just waiting to tell his real story to someone who wouldn't immediately judge him as a monster. And that leads to this incredibly beautiful moment of resolution. The local tour guide, Wayne, had worked there for years, telling thousands of tourists that Jeremiah was a villain. When the team revealed the truth, Wayne literally stepped in front of the camera and gave a sincere, heartfelt apology to the empty room. He promised to change the tour and make sure Jeremiah's true story was finally heard. The literal second he made that promise, that investigative dead bell went absolutely crazy. It rang nonstop, signaling that after hundreds of years, Jeremiah had finally been heard and found his peace. Let's see how this empathetic approach builds even further as we shift gears. we're moving from the cold stone cells of England to a remote, rain-soaked abandoned house in Maharashtra, India. It's a wildly different environment, but it uncovers yet another hidden tragedy. The team arrived at this falling-apart structure during a massive thunderstorm and instantly picked up on an overwhelming female presence. This entity was clinging to a deeply tragic memory tied directly to one chilling timestamp, 4 in the morning. Through some intense psychic readings and spirit box sessions, they unraveled the heartbreaking story of a family of 4 who used to be caretakers there. The female caretaker actually had unique psychic abilities herself, which tragically made her a target. She was so severely oppressed by the people around her that she was driven to take her own life right at 4 a.m. The team even got a clear vision of her wearing an off-white floral sari. And chillingly, they clearly heard the disembodied sound of her helpless husband weeping in the hallway. It was an echo of historical grief still trapped in the present day. But as they were trying to communicate with this grieving family, they realized they definitely were not alone. A third, intensely aggressive entity was lurking in the shadows, just watching them through a window from the next room. This dark entity turned out to be the former landlord, a deeply oppressive, patriarchal force. And let me tell you, he was furious that the team, especially the female investigators, were asking questions and digging up his dark past. He actively tried to shut the whole thing down. He physically pushed the cameraman out of a doorway. He sent the EMF meter spiking violently off the charts. He even grabbed the male lead investigator's wrist in this tight grip and projected this intense, hateful glare right at the women on the team. Then came a shocking moment of literal paranormal misogyny. As the female investigator demanded answers, the spirit box spat out this exact phrase: "Your place is in the kitchen and the bed." It was a staggering confirmation that even in death, this landlord's oppressive, patriarchal mindset hadn't changed one bit. He was still actively trying to silence women. But instead of fleeing from this terrifying confrontation, the team held their ground. They essentially acted as a human shield against the aggressive landlord to protect that trapped female spirit. And this brings us to their resolution method, which is how you actually set a spirit free. Helping a spirit crossover is surprisingly similar to psychological therapy. You can't just force it. First, you have to ask the spirit for their permission to help. Second, they have to verbally accept it. Once they do, the investigator guides them to visualize a golden light coming down. There's no physical door, the light is entirely a mental tool. By guiding the spirit to step into that light and disconnect from the space, you help them realize they aren't trapped by those physical walls anymore. You help them mentally break that centuries-old attachment, allowing them to finally transition. This perfectly shows what separates a true, empathetic investigation from a cheap horror movie. Traditional ghost hunters are just looking for jump scares. The second something aggressive happens, they bolt. But empathetic ghost hunters, they act as a shield. They stand right there in the darkness, face down the aggressive entities, dig for the historical truth, and offer peace to the people history silenced. It's not about proving a monster is real, it's about finding the human behind the haunting. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. Think about Jeremiah in his stone cell, or that female caretaker in the rain-soaked house. The next time you hear a ghost story, ask yourself, who is really doing the haunting, and who is just waiting to be set free? How many innocent stories are still sitting there in the dark, just hoping someone will finally show up and listen?